our live screen here. Yes. Ernst, if he is. Oh, wait, let me pick up. Oh man, this is gonna be a fun one today. I wholeheartedly believe that. Let's see here. I'm gonna turn his volume up so people can hear him. If he's even there. Hello. 1 second, sir. I'm gonna fix your audio real quick. You're gonna have to give me a moment. Output. Speak.
Hello.
There we go. Now we got the.
What's up, guys?
Check.
Is that Ray?
Yep.
Yeah, we can actually hear you now.
All right, super duper. That's what I like to hear.
That could not be any better. So as last week, sorry for people who were looking for the episode 4 of Get Blerded. Unfortunately, due to some really strange audio issues, we were not able to upload any form of episode 4. It has something to do, when I was looking through the video file, it has something to do with my desktop audio unfortunately not being recorded properly, which then caused issues with hearing the guest who I had on the show. He sounded extremely quiet. I thought it might have been his microphone, but it was actually something on my end, and for that I greatly apologize. So
sorry.
Gotta be sorry about it. So with that much said, welcome guys to Hashtag Get Blerded. This is episode 5. Look at that, we're halfway to 10 episodes.
Already.
I could not be any happier, but unfortunately this particular subject isn't exactly a happy one. We as gamers are basically having the community unfortunately being attacked once again, even though it's been going on for decades. First started off in the 80s, there was another one in the 90s, and now we're right back to this big old vicious cycle of this correlation between video games and violence. And I feel like it's a very important subject to talk about. So today I have with me Looney and Ray, as they were on the very first Get Blerded podcast, where we had a big old roundtable conference basically, which was a fun time. And we're going from the very first fun subject of can we trust our game developers to now what is going on with this violence to video game correlation. With that said, I actually have Ray right here, who, as we were talking about it and we were talking about it in our group chat, it became a very heated subject, and I feel like a lot of people can tidbit in on this. But Ray has almost a summary of what we're going to be talking about and why this is a very important subject to talk about, because I feel like after reading Facebook comments on the subject and without getting political, seeing how some people view this particular subject, especially with certain things that have gone on in the last months leading up to this particular podcast, we are now. I'm just gonna give it to you, Ray, for you to go ahead and speak and kind of what you've written down here. Tell us exactly how you kind of summarize this whole thing.
Yeah. Thank you. Listen, guys. When it comes to these, tragic events we hear about, like the ones we've been dealing with recently over the last few years, there's this idea, this sentiment that there's only one solution, right? And when you think of what a solution to a problem could be, well, you have to identify that problem. And the idea around this whole thing is that there is only one problem. And this idea that there's only one problem and only one solution is how we keep coming back to this correlation between violence and video games, despite the fact that scientifically, over and over again, this has been completely disproven. It's not true. It's not true, and it doesn't feel like with this happening, a solution is being, searched for. It looks like a scapegoat is being searched for, right. Not a solution. We like my man said, we did this in the 80s, we did this in the 90s, and now we're doing this again. It's not true. So we need to look at actual facts, we need to look at actual data, both here and other places, so we can find whatever solutions there are from all angles, as many angles as possible. Because look, blaming video games for violence does not provide any solutions. It's just an excuse not to address what the possible problem might be, and in turn, solving that problem. You can't solve a problem if you don't acknowledge it.
Right, and so that's why, and I'm glad we have Ernst here, because Ernst or Looney, I gotta start using your you gotta start using your alias here. So Looney, basically, one big thing that I forgot, there was something that you were telling me about, and I mean, it was a little bit more on the political side. Of course, we're gonna try to stick to the broader spectrum. I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to have any of us attempt to belittle anyone's political standpoint, because one, that's just not right. We would never want anybody to belittle us, so we're not going to belittle anybody. That's just not how we work here at all.
That's not what we
I agree.
And so, one thing I want to ask you, Ernst, or Looney, as I'm gonna get used to this.
You could call me either or. It doesn't really matter. No one's gonna ever get my name right. I'm probably the only Ernst around. But Looney has been something that everyone's been calling me lately, so it's ridiculous. Well, go on. What was your question?
But so the question for you right now is what is your? I want to kind of know your opinion on the correlation of violence in video games. What exactly is your thoughts? What's going through your mind whenever you hear those two things together? You hear those two V words together, and you know what? I want to know what's your thought about these two words coming together, basically being put in the same sentence.
I think it's to keep it short. I think it's complete and utter BS. For the majority of our generation, the majority of males in our generation, we've probably all played Grand Theft Auto, and I've never had an itch to go out and just cause violence against random human beings. Or we've probably played a buttload of violent video games. Starting with Grand Theft Auto is just one example. There's probably been Doom. Doom has been very violent, and God of War has been very violent, and all these violences are depicted in different ways. And most of the way these violent actions are depicted are something that you can't even do in real life. Look at God of War, for instance. And Mortal Kombat. You're not ripping out anyone's spine with your bare hands. This is not happening. You know what I mean? So violence in video games has been purely fictional, and that's how it should stay. It's a form of entertainment. It's like watching an action-packed movie. The amount of they used to blame movies too, or comic books. All these things. It's always a scapegoat that needs to get used. So people don't see the underlying real problem, and that is that people have mental health issues, and that they need help. That I believe we should probably as long as we look at that underlying problem and treat it as such as, I think there we'll start seeing some improvement. But saying that video games make someone violent, or was what causes people to be go out and do these violent actions, is just completely false. Like Ray said earlier, there's been several studies on it from different universities and different corporations, and they do not find, and they have not found a correlation between violence in humans and video games. You'll most likely get angry playing a video game. It doesn't even have to be a violent video game. You don't have to play COD to get angry at it. You can be playing Cuphead and you can get angry. You can be playing League and get angry. You can be playing certain puzzle games and get angry. You can get angry at a video game because it's not working as it's intended to. You can get angry at a video game because of the lag. You can get angry at a video game because it's hard. Yeah. So those are these are the things that that gamers will go through. And it does not correlate into any kind of violence. Yeah, people get frustrated to the point where they want to throw their controllers or break their keyboards or whatever, but that does not make them want to go out and commit these violent acts. There's never been a correlation. Video games are just being used as a scapegoat. Video games have had more of a positive impact on people than they have had a negative impact, in my opinion. And not even in my opinion, that's what just studies show. Both of you have been in CCSU's Esports and Gaming Club, and we have done things to be progressive in helping out communities. We deprived ourselves of sleep just so we can have a 24-hour stream to help the less fortunate. how does video game like it doesn't make any sense to say that video games like are causing people like do things. Video games are like a hobby. All right, like just like those individuals that like to go to the gun range and like go shooting and like they have no intention to like go out and like go like hurt somebody else with their firearm. Like video games do not make us video gamers violent. Like it's like Bray said, it's a scapegoat, plain and simple.
Right, and I'll piggyback off that with my opinion here, because one thing I mull over about it a lot, like since the subject keeps consistently coming up, and like for a lot of people, the reason why I'm very against the whole like these two words being correlated together is because like I come from a very steep history of video games, and it's like I've played way too many, and I will not lie, I've dwelled hours like I hate going through my Steam, and when it starts telling me like how many hours I spent on certain games, I'm just like, okay, maybe I need to cut back. But like I have 400 hours into like one particular game. I have like 400 to 500 hours into Warframe, and I'm like, all right, so this is a fantasy RPG MMO type game, action game that is about ninjas in space. But you don't see me climbing up trees, jumping off of walls, pretending I can go invisible.
Climbing rockets.
Right, and then going around slaying random people. Like that's not like you don't see me going around going like I'm on the moon. I'm gonna go slay these moon men. Like no, you don't see me going around here doing that. Like I don't know if it has something to do with this like overbearing thing that's because you see something in a video game, it instantly has to be immediately tuned in or immediately like related to something violent. Like I see guns in the real world and then I see guns in video games. Well, I'm not going to say the two are correlated to one another because that's just not the case. It's more of like, and I'm going to get into this because the second question actually gets into this a little bit more, but I have no reason to believe that violence and video games are really correlated with one another. Yes, I'm a gamer and of course I'm going to feel that way. But like from what I've seen and how much has been done to the point where like gaming has become a really big thing and it's actually enriched in our history. It has advanced as fast as technology has advanced, and to say that like somebody was inspired or it caused somebody or like you're basically trying to tell me that you're saying a video game rewired someone's brain to go and commit an action or it caused them to become more violent, in which that's not the case, because even I've caught myself raging at certain games that I shouldn't be. I'm trying to think, when was this game released? Was it 2007? 2007, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl came out for the first time. And I'm a 12-year-old kid, but I caught myself throwing my DS at the wall one time because Cynthia was just too damn hard of a champion.
Oh, you know what?
She was one of the she was literally the most challenging champion in the entire series to date.
To date.
And I'm just like, I still to this day have challenges with it. Like every time I get there, I'm like, I know how the game works. Why, even with a good team, why am I having this challenge? And I catch myself raging at times. But at most, it's a rage. It's not an actual like, I'm just gonna go out and just commit this craziness. I'm gonna go do some craziness out in the world because a video game told me to. Like, or my video game basically made my brain do it. It's not that easy. It's not easily, like, I can understand if like someone is a little bit mental. Like personally for me, I have bipolar disorder and I've had it for a very, very long time and I've only recently started getting it treated. But it's, even with that, it's still I don't still see myself like being rewired in my brain to like go do certain actions. I don't see that. And that coming from somebody with a mental health issue, I don't see what is exactly being correlated with the violence of video games. Like, why exactly are you guys correlating this? And it's just more and more becoming true that it's a scapegoat. It seems like a true scapegoat for that exact reason. Because,
Can I say something real quick?
Oh yeah, go right ahead.
What you just described was like frustration. That's what most of video games are going to do. They're going to make you frustrated because it actually challenges you.
Right, in which I prefer that in a challenge. Like, if a game makes me kind of like rage or get frustrated about it, I love that because I prefer that. Like, video games for me are too easy nowadays. Like, I feel like a lot of video games right now are way too easy.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if it causes me to rage or get frustrated, I'm fine with that. But I'm not going to sit here and tell somebody like, oh, a video game made me violent. My first ever video game played to my memory was Mortal Kombat.
The first one.
My very first video game in memory was Mortal Kombat. So it's like, I've been playing Mortal Kombat since I was basically like 4 years old. So you're gonna tell, like, there's no way that I'm here perfectly fine. So clearly, obviously it's probably be a person-to-person basis, but I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that a video game can make someone violent.
Exactly. Like if y'all sat in and watched me play Tetris Effect or the reignited version of the first Spyro, bruh.
Yeah, exactly.
Profanities on profanities on profanities. Spyro can't swim in the first game. You can't touch anything liquid. It sucks. But I was pissed,
right?
But I'm not violent in the outside world.
Right, I'm not going
No
crazy. I'm not trying to do anything like stupid or do any crazy actions. It's just, wow, this made me feel some emotion. I feel like getting an emotional attachment to games is okay. Like that's definitely okay. But like, I don't see like if you see your kid getting mad at a game, right? Like say we're parents in the future, we see our kids getting mad at the game. Coming from a gaming background, we're gonna see them get mad at a game and be like, I remember doing that. I remember getting mad at a game. I understand. Like I've broken keyboards, I've broken mice. I have a broken GameCube controller downstairs because Smash made me so pissed. Man, I threw that controller down so hard. But like also didn't help that the controller was broken beforehand, so I just broke it even more. But besides the point is the fact that it's like I see that frustration. I see why sometimes it can be really, really scary. To see somebody get frustrated at just a video game because it's like, oh my god, like this is just a fictitious thing. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you getting mad about it? And it's like, unless you come from a gaming background, you won't really understand.
Mm-hmm. And that said, that's comes back to looking at multiple like all the angles of the problem. That's when a parent or parental figure or guardian steps in and just like, hey, I understand. But relax. We don't need you breaking this stuff that's supposed to, you're supposed to be having a good time with.
Right. This allows you to play the game, kiddo. Don't break that controller. Yeah. I'm not buying you a new one. Like, see, it's just something along those lines. Legit. Like, it doesn't really cause anybody. Like, and I'm not gonna say it's bad parenting or anything like that causes any of this stuff to happen. No. But like I've seen, and I have quite a few different parents, even some of them around my age. So like, there's a couple people who like I graduated high school with or I went to high school with. They're already parents, and they're very strong against like this whole thing where it's like violence in video games. But I'm like, do you understand, like, are you coming from a gaming background understanding like how these games work? Literally most games will say these are just fictitious events and all these actions that you see here should not be committed in real life. Just like a movie will warn you that things were done by actual stunt performers, you should not do it in real life. Video games will tell you that whatever acts of violence that are going on in the game are completely fictitious events, and potentially, which is going to be another thing we're going to bring up upon. We're gonna segue right into the next question. What's up?
Before that, sorry, I didn't mean to like cut you off there, but like when you made a very good point about like the ESRB ratings on like video games. There's for no reason like I should be being a rated M game, which is 17 plus, and like Karen's little Dachani is 12-year-old is like on calling me the hard R. So that is a parenting issue because you can't even buy a rated M game without a parent's consent. Yeah. Like parents didn't want to take their kids to go see Deadpool because like they thought it was like something else, and they thought it was gonna be like a family thing, and they realized that it wasn't. So like your kid should not be on like COD or like any kind of like rated M game. That is in fact a poor parenting skill, like hands down.
Yeah, no, yeah. Like I just to piggyback off that real quick. Yep. It's those same people who believe, video games cause violence, who will not pay attention to the tools put in place to make sure that people who are not of a certain headspace and age do not have access to certain things. The same way movies have the same system, but they just want to make a general statement. And while that's not completely related to, the main issue, it's not something that can be ignored either. People need to pay more attention to the tools in place.
Right, and then again, like, actually, it's like, but that's the reason why I said, like, I don't want to completely blame parents for, like, buying their kids rated M games, because I know my mother bought me rated M games on multiple occasions. And then
we were also a different generation.
I mean, but that's the thing, though. That doesn't really, it doesn't entirely matter, though, about what generation we're in, because in reality, any generation that plays games, in general, like they can correlate that. Like when we're long past our gaming ages, there's gonna come a time where they're gonna pull up this same exact question again, and that's the reason why I want to ask you guys, like, without mention of like any political or past events that's happened, other than like maybe actual like historical events like world wars, things like that, and obviously fictitious stuff that we've seen like books and everything. Would you say that like video games are actually inspired by violence? So, like, you know, acts of history, acts of things, and I actually have a quick thing I want to tidbit on this because there's one particular game series I want to touch on that is rated M and is technically based on a lot of historical events, and you guys should probably guess because it's my favorite game series of all time, Assassin's Creed. So right now, I truly believe that we have video games that are more inspired by violence than violence being inspired by video games. And the reason why I say this is because there's literally an entire series of games that uses the violence that we have in our history currently, and it's delved deep into it, where we now, like, it's basically what inspires the game. So for Assassin's Creed, we go as far as back to, I want to say it's Jerusalem back in the 1200s. Then you have Italy and Rome in the 1400s. We then go into the French Revolution, which we know was a very violent and bloody time. Then we go into the American Revolution, which is another very violent and bloody time. There's slavery times, where is another violent and bloody time, Civil War type stuff. And then you have the, obviously, like, you know, the, what is it called? The manufacturing period. I'm trying to think of it. Is it manufacturing period? The manufacturing era? Or like the steel era back in the 1800s for England and such. And again, another really bloody time where like
wasn't that the Industrial Revolution?
Like the Industrial Revolution. Thank you. And
I was trying to think.
I was trying to think of it too. I was like, manufacturing era. It's like that's when big mass manufacturing started happening though.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, that's still like that was during a time when like the rich ran the poor, and then there was a lot of gang violence. We had Jack the Ripper happening during that time. Like, there's so many historical things that happen in these particular like games, and I'm just like, we literally have that inspired by history. Call of Duty's another one where we have Modern Warfare 2, which is it's not like an exact, I'm not gonna say it's an exact like correlation to what's going on currently out in the Middle East or whatever, because that's not the case, but it's still like, you know, all the things that are being used are like twist on modern history. When we talk about the Bay of Pigs, like the Cold War and everything, Fidel Castro, you know, CIA, whenever there's CIA sleeper agents and things like that, that's inspired by real history. That is actually inspired by the fact that we have this violence. We're able to use this and spin this into more stories to make violence, like to make like a violent video game. Yes, but it's not necessarily because of the fact that the developers or the storyboard tellers had the intentions of making this game violent. It was more of, we have a historical event, or we have some type of fictitious event that we can make into a game. Let's go ahead and make it into a game. We got God of War that uses Greek mythology to basically correlate into this one big game. And yes, the game is very bloody, it's very gruesome, it's very violent. Yes, we know this. But that is to say, it's because of the history that we have and the stories that's been told over hundreds of years. That's the reason why we have this game in the first place. If we never had the beliefs of Greek mythology, if we never had the Greek gods, if we never had, you know, a violent era of war with, like, you know, the Spartans and things like that, how can you possibly say that violence, if video games cause violence, when we had the violence already happen to help inspire these video games in the first place? You can't consistently keep saying that over and over and over again. And that's why I believe, like, because of the fact that we're going to have constant violence in our lives, like, violence is one thing that you can never get rid of. Because of that, this is going to cause this subject to be a never-ending cycle. It's just going to be an endless rut, because whenever something crazy happens, they're just going to wrap it right back around again, because, again, that we continuously have violent video games because of violent history. I want you guys to kind of maybe touch in on that if you can. Again, without trying to think of any past events, unless they're historical or fictitious. Like, what do you guys believe, or would you say that video games are more inspired by violence than the vice versa?
Ernst, you can go first.
I would bring off the point of like history that you had brought up in your spiel there. Humans like have like we've like always been we've always been violent. So like they're like, I don't want to say we've always been violent, but we've had a bloody history. Like you think like after World War I, and people were like, oh, that's the world to end all wars, but humans were like, no, that's where you're wrong. They can make a meme about that. Like, you know, you're a time traveler and then you go back in time. They're like, oh, I'm glad that World War I was over. I'm like, oh, then like somebody said time travel was like, oh, the first one, and they're like, first one? Say psych right now. But here it is. Like we had our second one, and like even now, like the tensions that like are happening in the world, like, you know, it's just there. Like even if you look at it in like an evolutionary like standpoint, like there's the humans that made like the Homo sapiens, and like they saw like these other group of humans, and these other group of humans were like Homo sapiens, where they were very friendly, and they're like, you know, like they saw these humans and like they met with them, like, oh, come on, let's you know, let's eat, let's have a good time or whatever. You know, like, in like a caveman sort of way. But the other humans were like, we should dominate these guys, and they killed all the men, raped all the women, and like just dominated them. Humans have just been violent. So like, yeah, like we have like this violent history. And do I think like that violence has been correlated into video games? Yes, because that's just part of our history. It's something that like we understand. But we also understand that like a normal functioning brain understands that video games are fictitious. You know, like sometimes it could be as a good learning tool. The amount of violence that may have been in Assassin's Creed, but there's been a lot of people that have used like the layout of the of like, it wasn't just the violence that was mimicked in Assassin's Creed. It was actually like the layout of those countries that were actually like inspired the game, like, you know, in Italy or whatever. And like you've heard the story of that kid that like went around and was able to show his class all around like Italy and Venice because like he's been around it in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So you see,
it's crazy because they use literal historians and stuff to actually develop these games, and they say it all the time.
Exactly.
And so like, why do you think this this particular like inspiration, like what exactly is causing, like why is this, like what makes this important to like video games? Like is it important to have violence in our video games? Like I just want to kind of, because you kind of touched on that a little bit, like without this, we wouldn't really have it. So like, do you think like having some violence in video games is actually important to it?
Well, no, that's not necessarily true. Some of the games that I've like really enjoyed playing have had no violence. I don't think Pokemon counts because there's like a little it's like a low level of violence in it. But like there's this game, I think it was called like Firestone or whatever, and like you would go around. It was a really good game, and you would go around and like you were kind of like Smokey the Bear, and like when you would go around, you'd make sure a national park is okay. And at the end of the game, there was like a firestorm, and that's like just an event of like nature. And the game was like really wholesome. There's been a lot of like really wholesome games out there that are just like really relaxing, and there's like no violence in them. So like, I think violence is just like something that's like it's like a tidbit. It's like something like, oh, like this is like really cool. Like you're playing Doom, and like you can like make all these like demons explode with like whatever gun you're using. Or like I'm playing Destiny 2 and like, you know, I'm like punching a thrall in the face. Like it's just like making you like feel like a badass in a sense. Like violence is like a tool of like entertainment. Sadly to say, but like it's been there for a while, like the Roman Colosseum. And then now it's just like translated into like video games. Like you could call football violent. You can call, I played rugby. You can call that violent. Like, you know, I'm putting my shoulder into someone else's ribs, you know, trying to like hurt them to get them to like stop. You know what I mean? So like it's just like violence has different like levels to it, and like at the same time it has
hockey, come on.
Hockey, you straight up fight somebody on the ice.
Like we see in basketball games, hockey games, baseball games, where things get heated, and then they just decide that they're just gonna go all out on these dudes. Like they really just believe it's like, oh, we're just gonna go ahead and just start swinging. People get cut, people get hurt, people get teeth knocked out, all that kind of stuff, spat on, everything. Like we literally see this stuff happen, and like people will literally say like, oh, I go to hockey games because I just want to see a fight break out.
I was about to say that. You
literally go to a hockey game to watch a fight break out, but when it comes to seeing a fight break out in a video game, you consider that too violent?
Not even between players, like in the game. but that's too violent. Why?
And even Luminaire's in the chat right now. Even he said it, but like he said that in our discussion in the group chat too, where it's like people literally go to these events and they literally like we watch wrestling, literally professional wrestling. We watch dudes get punched in the face for a lot of money. We literally watch guys punch each other in the face because they're gonna make a lot of money off of punching each other in the face
and slamming each other
exactly like
into the ground.
These guys like they literally get punched and they get their faces like disfigured from fights, leave bleeding, and you will literally let your kid watch that. Some people even let their kids partake in that. They're like, oh, I want to teach my kid UFC. I want to teach my kid martial arts, and then these kids are going into these cages, fighting each other. And I get it, like boxing, UFC is very popular, yes. But, like, even then, it's still, like, you're letting your kids do this, and you wonder why. Like, that can cause a violent tendency because they're actually engaging in the actual act. But when you're playing a video game, you're not engaging in that act of violence. You're doing it, even if you are, you're technically doing it in a very fictitious manner. You're pressing a button on a controller. You're not actually, like, going out and committing these actions. It's not how it works. And that's the reason why, like, I don't want this to become a continuously going cycle. Mm-hmm. You're literally saying that because of the fact that you see a violent image, it's gonna cause a violent image in somebody else, even though most logical people would probably not say that. They would actually say like, oh, it's actually more of, I can understand like where the inspirations come for certain things to happen, mm-hmm. but I can't directly say like this is causing violence because of the fact that there's a fictitious way of a child committing these actions. And
dude,
again,
people like, I want you to think about something. Sorry to cut you off. I want you to think about
go
something.
ahead, please.
But like, think about when your sports, like, think about when your sports team like wins like World Cup or something, mm-hmm. and like everybody gets together and they just start like losing their shit and like rioting in the streets. All right, like there was like no violence involved. Like let's say like a baseball team run, like no violence involved, and people just go. Yeah, people lost it, like during March Madness. People cars. Like were setting things on fire, so they lost their shit because people won. Because people won a basketball game, like that's insane. But like video games cause violence, like no. Like to end my like spiel like on the matter, I think that like people like video games will keep getting blamed for like causing violence, like everything else. Like it's. Like it started with like comic books, rock music, and then like now it's like video games. Like they're like all these things are just like causing violence. Whatever the next thing is after video games, they're just gonna blame that as well. Like people just don't like to see the actual underlying issues.
It's the dubstep.
It's literally the dubstep of video. It's like the dubstep of any like scapegoat right now.
Blame the dubstep.
Blame dubstep whenever things don't go right, right? Like, we're gonna put electronic in this music. Oh, the song didn't go right because we had electronic in it. All right, so basically, let's blame games because something went wrong, and we don't have, we can't pinpoint a singular solution or multiple solutions to a problem. So we're just gonna pinpoint on this one specific thing that we know for a fact that we can get people behind. And so that's why I want to like go on to the next actually the final question here.
Well, can I?
Yeah. Yes, please.
To real quick with what Luminaire said, you brought up a good point. Let it be known that none of us do not advocate for like self-defense. There's just a difference between I'm gonna teach my kid how to defend themselves and hey, go enjoy that cage match. But violence, video games cause violence. Yeah, okay. But with regards to violence in like historic video games, there was, if you go on I think it's Tom and Jerry season 2, the DVD, the introduction says basically, hey, there are some racist drawings, racist stereotypes in these cartoons, and it would be a disservice to take those out because it would, I'm paraphrasing, but it would be a lie. It wouldn't be honest. So in cases in which, violence is part of whatever history the game is based on, taking that out would be completely disingenuous. And it would immediately have those people who are waiting for people to screw up, just like, actually, this gaming company completely screwed this up. This is not how it went. La-di-da-di-da. And then, the game tanks. So it's like if Assassin's Creed did not have those,
historical aspects.
Yeah, people would just be like, this is not accurate at all. This sucks. Stop. you know, you know. So it's like when it comes to like Ernst said, violence is not necessarily a necessity, but at the same time, you cannot be disingenuous when it comes to, especially when it comes to like games based on history.
Exactly.
Because when it comes to building a game, you want people to connect to it and be like, oh wow, they did this really well, and the gameplay and the acting and the this and the that. If you're doing a game that is, you know, based off of something factual, and you've got quintessential facts wrong, it's over.
Exactly. And
game over.
And so, like, for us to discuss as gamers, and I want us to bring to this final question here, because I feel like this is very, very important to ask. I want to ask both of you, like, what exactly so real quick, someone was asked, the Master Warrior, why the talks about peace but know so much about war. The Master stated it would be better to be a warrior in a garden than a farmer in a war. And that's kind of going back to the whole self-defense thing. And thank you, Looney, for putting that up there. Because now it's time for us to really, like, wrap this around and say, like, what would need to happen for us to stop this correlation between violence and video games? Or is there no stopping it? Is there no way of actually stopping this correlation? Is it just going to be a like I said before, is it going to be a continuous, endless rut? Are we gonna be able to stop this? Like, I mean, can the community come together and try to show, like, why video games, like, you know, why they're not considered, like, violent, like a catalyst for violence? Like, we can't continue to blame it anymore. I mean, for us to really, I feel like what needs to be done is the social media aspect of this, like how this is being spread, who's saying it exactly, and like, because the thing is that you hear it from one person, but you might not listen to it from another. So, for example, the old CEO of Nintendo America, we all know and love, Reggie, he put up on Twitter a tweet, which I'm actually gonna try to pull up right now, because this is actually a really good tweet that, like, that actually the person who helps me with my podcast, Nick, showed me earlier. And he showed me this tweet from him. And let me see if I can find it right here. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to draw this up. Here it is. So I'm gonna show you guys live on my screen right here. Where is it? Screen share. So this is a graph of video game revenue, and then the violent. Unfortunately, this is bringing up close to, like, what exactly is going on, but this is actually very pertaining to, like, pertains to the matter. Video game per capita, how much is per person estimate, like, you know, made on video games per person in the actual country. Now, you look at it per 100,000 people, and so per 100,000, so this is by the 100,000s, how many violent gun deaths happen based upon how much. We are the third. We produce the third most, like, video game revenue in the entire world. We produce the third most, but we are first in violence when it comes to buying video games and such.
By a large
margin. It's a very large margin. We're the only one who actually breaks over 100,000. We're the only country that does. Why is that? And it has to do something because of the fact that, like, we don't know what the hell is even going on in the country anymore, really. We don't know what's going on in this crazy world that we live in. But that also brings to the point that, yes, we don't know what's going on in our crazy, messed up world that we all live in and such, but also we're tying two things together that literally don't need to be tied together. And I think if we had people who understood this and actually could speak upon it with true educational fact and help reach those people who are correlating these two together, then this could possibly start going on the way to stop it. Like, try to show people the benefits of what's going on. Like, for example, esports is a whole new type of pro scene of video games that is actually giving some kids who, they gamed all their lives and now they're pros at it, they're really good at it, and now they're able to make money, they're able to make a livelihood off of what they're doing. And it's actually, there's a lot more positives to gaming that have come, especially in the last 10 years. Like gaming with YouTube gaming, Twitch, Mixer, all that kind of stuff, being able to outreach to people, we have been able to basically create a whole new community. And it's now a lot of these people who are in this community feel as if we will never be let go. We can never let go of these two V words coming together, which is video games and violence. So like Ernst, real quick, if you don't mind me asking, what do you think would have to happen to stop this correlation? Like, can we do anything to stop it? Is there gonna be any way of stopping it?
All right. So the main problem, in my opinion, with the correlation of like violence in video games is just ignorance. For the longest time, as you've seen and as Ray has seen, because you guys were both in the esports club and you've seen what we do. Mm-hmm. We are not the only gaming community in like America that like gets together and like games for the better of the society and like helping the less fortunate. So like the issue seems to be that people will only like see the bad side of things. They'll like try to use things as a scapegoat, and like the best thing that we can do is like try to educate people. Like, this is not what happens. Like, like you like once you start, like the best way to like fight like off like an ignorant statement is with education. And like I know that doesn't sound like in today's climate, like the way like how things work, it might not sound like that like educating people will work, and some people just like don't want to listen. Mm-hmm. But like education is the way. Like people just need to like people like who don't have an understanding about like video games or whatever are like the ones that are saying this, and they're the way, and it's actually like, it's not helping, it's not progressing with anybody. There are a lot of people like even on like Twitter, like whenever like video games got played, people got together and like they would tell their experiences of like why video games help them. A lot of video games have helped a lot of people that are like mentally ill, like too, like like they would like like some people like who like have like depression. I hear this a lot, and like they would get on a video game, they'd get on Discords like with their friends or whatever, and they would be able to like find some kind of entertainment, enjoy playing a video game. So like to like say that it will be stopped, it probably won't. People might be stuck in their ways until there's something else to blame. Mm-hmm. Because it's always going to come down to like the blame game. Like there's like people like are afraid of like seeing the truth of things, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And that's gonna keep causing like this issue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm gonna expand on what you said, because he's absolutely right. It's the ignorance and what we all see on like Facebook, social media, everywhere else are a lot. It's a lot of regurgitation in terms of people who decide to support this idea that video games cause violence. But where it's different in in the case of what we're talking about, that information, that false information, has a specific source, and those are the people that they voted for, that they feel represent them. So in terms of stopping it and stopping this correlation, one option is horrible and one option is unlikely. The unlikely option is these people who represent their voters face up to the fact that, hey, you know what, the data is saying this. The data is saying, this is not a thing. It has been factually disproven. Let's look at other possible solutions or possible problems, and in turn possible solutions. The other issue or the other outcome is horrible in that many more of these tragic events would have to happen from people who absolutely despise video games and think that video games are evil and they all must burn and all that. And it would have to be 5, 10, 15 more of these awful events for them to be like, well, might not be the video games, and that's much worse, so it's when I'm talking about regurgitation, it's they're regurgitating information that they're receiving from people for whom it benefits to say that it's the video games. It's nothing else. It's the video games because it benefits them. So it's like one of those things would have to happen, and none of them, they're either unlikely or horrible. So I mean, I'm hoping that these influencers will decide that a scapegoat will not solve anything. But in terms of us, we can just, the way we can stop it is keep doing what we're doing in terms of, like Ernst said, the positivity, cutting down on the toxicity, because I feel like that does contribute to this bad stigma that gaming gets as a whole, not just in relation to this. We just have to keep making ourselves better so that when someone says it's the video games, people even outside of the gaming community can be like, what are you talking about?
Exactly. That's the perfect way of summing that up. Like, really, it's as already been said, it is an education factor. We have to educate ourselves and educate other people as well upon the subject of what video games really are, what they really do. Try to let people know exactly. As the gaming community, we have to defend what is precious to us, and that is gaming. Because there was a point in time where I believe Rated M Games was never sold in Australia anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, there was a point in time where if a video game was deemed too violent, it could not be sold in a country. And I think there's plenty of banned video games elsewhere out there. Like, there's a lot of them. And, when we look at it like that, it's just, what exactly do we have to do to avoid these things and avoid these types of actions from happening? Is basically just truly education. Education will ultimately lead to the ignorance being not eradicated, but definitely being lessened.
And delegitimized.
Exactly. And then also educating, letting people know, like, hey, if you truly feel like, you want to go out and act upon certain actions that, that you maybe seen elsewhere, been inspired by, because remember, it's not just video games. We've seen people inspired by TV shows, by comics, by books they've read. There's plenty of people who've done things because of the fact that they've been inspired by something else, not just video games. Mm-hmm. If you truly believe that video games cause these types of violent actions, why don't we be more educating upon the fact that, hey, if you feel like this is something, and this goes back to the mental health issue, seek help. Be willing to be emotionally aware and say to yourself, hey, I have these thoughts, I have these emotions. Let me go get help for these. And I'm just being a mental health advocate kind of right now, because I've had my battle with mental health, and many people already know this. Many people who've known me for years know this. And I wanted to just say, like, get help if you believe you need it. Mm-hmm. That's how I want to end this off. I just want to say, become educated. And then this ignorance will finally be delegitimized, and more people will be less likely to continue to make this correlation between games. Mm-hmm. And with that much said, guys, thank you guys for joining us on Get Blerded. For the people who were here, this is Melko, Ray, and Looney on deck from the Blerd Gang. And catch us next week on the next episode of Get Blerded. We're getting closer and closer to 10 episodes, and I can't wait to hit that for you guys. With that much said, Looney, once again, thank you for coming on to the show, bro.
Thanks, Looney.
It's my pleasure.
Awesome. And Ray, once again, thank you for coming live into the studio, my friend.
You know it.
All right. And with that said, guys, peace out. Woo. I honestly.
Later.
Later.